There we go.
Here we go.
Hi, James. How are you doing?
I'm great. Well, actually, I'm having quite exciting times, but for the purposes of this interview, I'm fine.
Well, it looks like you're reclining in glorious splendor.
I'm at my late mother's house in Mill Valley, California. I'm here to spend the final Thanksgiving with my siblings and our cousin, and that's where I am. I'm not at home, but I'm in
Okay.
my childhood room.
This is the room you grew up in?
Yep, my mom lived here for 77 years, 78 years.
And has the wall changed color at all since the
No,
time you were there? No, no.
no,
Okay.
it was always this color. And things get put down in this house and stay there for 50 years. So there's that.
She's wasn't one to meddle with things that were working.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, let's get started. Today, I'm here on Fair Folk at Work with my good friend, James Kelly.
How you doing?
You probably know James best for his books of poetry called
It could be verse
It
and
Could
Body
Be.
Parts, although Body Parts has not hit the streets yet. It's in the works. But It Could Be Verse is available from me only.
From you
Not on
only.
Amazon, not on Kindle. Gotta see me.
And how do they get in touch with you then?
Sure, I'm JIMXXJIM at Mac. That's MAC.com. Jim at Mac.com.
Well done. Well, let's get right to it. Who was the first person to invite you to Fair, and what did they say to get you there?
Well, I was a wordless dancing hippie in 1969, and my whole household was going to the fair, and I was swept along.
Do you remember your first costume?
Costume? Yes, I remember what I was. It's hardly a costume, but I remember what I was wearing. I was wearing a pair of diaphanous paisley pants and nothing else.
Was
And
this in Topanga?
no, this is in Peacock Gap.
And
This is
did
in
you have a good time?
I had an amazing time. My friends gave me a little bit of money, and I was in the throes of a psychic malaise, and I wanted some help. So I saw a fortune telling gypsy, literally a gypsy, and she talked to me. And at the end of the fair, she gave me what amounted to a real reading. And I sat down next to this woman. She was talking to someone else. And I looked at my flesh and I could see constellations. I could see stars through me. I was like looking at the sky through my body. And she appeared to be talking to someone else, but I knew she was looking at me. And then at the end, she gave me 3 pieces of advice that turned out to be absolutely true and changed my life.
Do you
So,
remember those 3 pieces
oh,
of
absolutely. Yes, of course. I had
please?
stopped talking for reasons I won't go into here. I'd stopped talking and would only communicate through dance. So when I went back to the fair on my own the following week and kind of stood outside the gates of the fair, wearing same diaphanous paisley pants and nothing else, no money, no ID, no nothing. One of the people at the gate looked at me and said, "Oh, you need to be in here," and motioned me through the gate. Went in on a Saturday morning, wordless dancing hippie. I stayed that night and the following week, and people took care of me. I was a shaman on a vision quest, and everybody could see it. And people took care of me. And then at the end of the fair, when she said, "You will reconcile with your family, you will perform for the public, and you will find love." So those were all pretty profound, and they all worked out. It was a gypsy. She observed me. I spoke to her the first day I went there and the last day. And during that time, she had watched me and had drawn her own conclusions or made her own studies. I was a scared little kid. I was afraid of all of the. I was afraid the fair management would find out about me and throw me out, which in fact they did. But that's another story.
Well, I'm kind of interested in that
Okay,
story
well,
as well.
yeah, I went back to fair the next year. When I left the fairgrounds, I was seen in public by the director of a dance company and she invited me to join her dance company, which I did. And we performed with Alan Watts. We were like a little resident dance troupe for a art center in Sausalito. So I went back to the fair the next year and said, "Oh, you've changed my life. You brought me such joy, and I want to give it back to the fair. And here's what I do. And I'm just an aspiring little guy, and please accept me." And Carol Lafleur said, "It's just a job. It's just a job." Oh, well, gosh, okay. She gave me a pass, and there was the woman who played Queen was Julie Meredith.
Mhm.
Julie she's deceased now, was an extremely talented woman and made beautiful paper mache dolls and played the Queen and had a beautiful voice and was a great actress, but she was a little strange and she wanted me to sleep with her. And I was gay, still was, didn't want to sleep with her. It's pissed her off. And she had me effectively banished from fair. It didn't work because I'm still there and she's not. So there.
And you, the security guard at the front gate, so you could get in anytime?
No, not really, but I actually paid for admissions for a year so that I didn't have to worry about getting a pass. And after that, the shadow had passed, and Ray Tatter was entertainment director, and he was a wonderful guy and got me. And then Peg Long, she was wonderful and she understood me. I played William Shakespeare for a couple of years, but that wasn't really what I was supposed to do. So I've done a lot of different things at fair.
You mentioned Peg Long. Did early people at fair give you like fair advice on how to deal with fair, or did they just let you go and do your own thing?
Well, the first person that I played with at fair was Judy Corey, and we are fast friends and we have been friends all of our mutual lives since then. And Judy didn't say anything specific, but Judy is something so wonderful. She invites play in such a generous, magical way that she made me feel part of the community in a way that no piece of paper could have. She had such huge magic that she basically swept me along with it. She gave me permission to be who I am at the fair. It was more than any kind of night pass or anything. It was Judy playing with me in the street and encouraging me to be who I am.
I've talked to Judy, and the really wonderful thing about her and sort of audience participation members is that she sets it up so that you can't fail, that the participant or the person she has drawn in is going to have a good time and is going to be entertaining to the people around everybody.
She was genius at that. It's a small scale genius. It's not like captivating a stage from an opera singer, but it's creating a circle of safety and harmony and joy that's inhabited by anyone who participates. She's great.
Well, it might not be earth shattering, but I think for the people in it, it is earth shattering to them.
So she connected with me and made me feel welcome.
And that's all it took was one person.
I was very shy. I didn't talk. I stopped talking for reasons I won't go into. I stopped talking, but I did dance, and I was charming and cute and sweet, and would do anything for anybody.
Well, that's a drawback if you're playing William Shakespeare.
Well, this was when I first came to fair. By the time I recovered my power of speech in intervening between first and second year of fair in 69 and 70. It was a miracle. And when I played William Shakespeare, the fair didn't know what to do with me. I auditioned with sonnets, which I know many of them. I grew up learning poetry, so I know lots of poems by heart. And Peg absolutely loved that. For good reason. I did them well. And so they made me Shakespeare, but they didn't integrate me into any shows. They didn't introduce me on the street. It was up to me to introduce myself as who I wanted to be and to convince somebody. And didn't really suit my talents. So Peg invented a job for me I would go to Ray Griswold in the morning and get a bunch of flowers. And then my job was to whisper sonnets or love poems into the ears of individuals.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
It
a
was not
great thing.
it was not a public thing. It was a woman, whoever it was, would be giggling and blushing and going, "Oh, oh," and her friends would say, "What?" And it was a wonderful gig, and I could do it as much as I liked. And I'm a small scale entertainer. I'm not a declaimer from a stage. I'm a whisper in the ear kind of. So that was really suited to my talents. And then they made me a director of contests, as in organizing them, but I ran them. Backstory: back when the fair had social and cultural aspirations, Phyllis arranged for every week, every day of fair, there was a contest: a rose for the queen, bread baking, toy making, costume contests, make a hat, all kinds of different things. I would meet the contestants outside the gate, take them to a stage, conduct and judge the contest before the first show arrived at the stage at 11 o'clock. So that was a totally fun gig. I did it for 4 or 5 years.
When I talked to Judy, what I think sort of was her legacy, and you directly plug into that, was the feeling of that you could come to fair and you could participate, but it was almost like a one-on-one thing. It wasn't like they're sitting on passively on a hay bale, but they're in the show being themselves and just being totally supported. And I'm sure there are people today who might not remember anything else for the past 50 years, but that you whispered a Shakespeare sonnet and that all her friends were giggling.
Oh,
And
I know it was memorable.
but I told Judy was that I think the legacy of the fair in many ways is that one-on-one interaction that people get on the streets. And I think in many ways she's sort of the reason that people who have never heard of Agora but still do that same kind of one-on-one sort of salesmanship or hawking is so what makes the fair so special.
I think you're right. It's not that somebody sold me a doodad. It's that he took his time to explain it, and he does this, all that, and it's not just a little thing. It's more than just a performance. He talked to me.
You also sang with the Britain
Britain
ensemble.
Ensemble, yeah. That's actually kind of my last incarnation.
Well, what were some of your incarnations before? And then we'll get to the Briton ensemble.
Okay, well, let's see. Dancing Hippie, Persona non grata. Then I worked for Casey Jones. He was my first actual job at the fair, selling hats. Played Shakespeare. Then I worked with Buffalo. Worked in Buffalo's booth, and my late honey and I would put on dance parties after hours on Saturday nights. And then after Buffalo's booth, we worked briefly for Heidi Barthélemy, and then for Stephen Overstreet. We were the only men ever to do bodice fittings for Stephen Overstreet, by the way. And then after that, became attached to Chris Neely's booth, where we created something called Back World, which was basically a social hangout for fair folk to get out of the fair and have a drink and put their feet up. We had a dance floor and a swimming pool and cocktail bar, and it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
And then after DeVore ended, Heidi is my closest friend. Her address is my house because she's peripatetic and I'm stable. So she had a booth at the fair, and I would just go and attach myself and visit it for a few weekends and spend money. And then about 2003, 2004, James Hendricks started what became the Britain Ensemble. We sang madrigals and appropriate Renaissance songs. We do 2 seasons, do a spring season culminating with performances at the fair and a concert, and then a fall season culminating with a holiday show and a Dickens Fair appearance. But COVID ended that, so that's over. And
I
Heidi
remember your guys' Christmas show up in Altadena.
Yeah.
What differences as a performer did you feel between being in a singing group as opposed to an acting improv kind of troupe?
Oh, well, I do what somebody else tells me. I just want to get out of the way and make sure that my part is supported. I'm not there to be a star. I don't want anyone to hear my voice. I don't want to stand out in any way, although I want to be entertaining and amusing. I don't want to be, I'm not a front man, and I don't want to act like one. When you're on a stage, you need to take the focus and keep it as long as you need it. But when you're singing chorally, you need to not have the focus, but you do need to relate outwards so that you are part of a general focus rather than a specific one.
That's
But,
very well
but
put, I think.
well, my time at the fair, I wasn't really in shows that took place on
Well, you're on the
stages.
street, and that
Yeah,
counts.
yeah.
Yeah. You've been in the Fools Guild?
I was King of Fools. Jim and I were the first binary kings, the first gay kings. We were king in 92. We were 13th king of Kings of Fools.
What was the impetus behind the creation of the Fools Guild?
Well, of course, that took place outside of my purview, but I can tell you because it's
Sure, go ahead.
part of lore. The Fools Guild originally was a thumb in the eye of the fair bureaucracy. The first King of Fools was first and second was crowned in the privies, and it was a chaotic, anarchic parade, basically as a thumb in the eye of the established order of the fair management. Fair actually likes the Fools Guild. That was his impetus. And the first king was Andy Davis, styled himself Anonymous the First. Next king was Dennis Day, the late Mouseketeer, and he was also crowned in the privies. But all of that took place before I was really involved with it because I go to Southern California until 1977, and that's when the Fools Guild was already, had already started. It's mostly a Southern California thing, although fools have moved everywhere.
There is a weird synergy between Fair and Fools. But one of the things I really like about the fair is that you could kind of do that. You could have a sort of sudden idea, and then you could find like 5, 10 other people and go, let's go do this. And they'd go, okay, let's lie down in front of the Queen's Parade or something like that.
Well, yeah, and if you tell a joke at the front of the fair, then you can run to the back of the fair and it'll beat you there.
Yes, there was a lot of sharing that goes on. Were there any lessons of street performing or interacting with people at fair that you have used outside of fair?
Okay, perhaps the most important thing I have learned as a performer, and fair certainly honed this, was be aware of your audience feedback. I'm a rhapsode. That means I recite poems, and poetry is sometimes difficult to understand syntactically or word choice or imagery for whatever reason. So as a rhapsode, it's my job to not go faster than comprehension. And yet, if you go too slowly, you also lose them in the other direction. So you have to listen psychically to how fast your audience is hearing you. And that you learn up close. But then once you've learned it up close, that same principle applies on larger scales as well.
Where did you learn the importance, say, of props?
I think a prop is most useful for getting your audience to focus on something, to gather their energy. So you wave at something and then everyone's looking at it, or you call attention to it. I mean, if you're going to use a prop in that kind of way. But I'm not an actor. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't usually, I don't, that this is not, I don't
Right.
perform other people's scripts other than poems, and those don't usually require props. So I don't use very many props in
Well, I
general.
think that's probably one of the things that makes you unique is that you use your voice and your words, and that becomes a lack of a barrier as you create that illusion with the audience or the person who you're with. Am I just making that up, or do you
No, I
think
think
that's right?
I think you hit something there.
Do you have a favorite poem? You know it will always work.
Yeah, I got a few. I got a few. They're not all Renaissance fair poems. My love in her attire doth show her wit. It doth so well become her. For every season hath she dressings fit. For winter, spring, and summer. No beauty does she miss when all her robes are on. But beauty's self she is when all her robes are gone. Now, I didn't do a very rendition. That can usually amuse somebody.
That
There's a,
is a great poem.
it's a
I
great
mean,
poem. Yeah,
it's
it's anonymous
there's
too.
it's oh well, then you could perform it in front of millions of people, but it's not dirty,
No,
and
not
there's
really.
nothing to take offense at it, and you can do it in front of a girl in front of her jealous boyfriend,
Yeah.
and
And,
everybody's walks away with a smile.
and it's a comment on costume,
Yes.
which
If
is what made it useful there. Now, a great introductory poem, although it's not Renaissance, is "Day is Done" by Longfellow. Is a great campfire or an evening poem. There are a lot of them that I use situationally, but
it's great to have that sort of in your hip pocket that you can kind of gauge the mood of the room and say, this is what'll work here.
I would have preferred to have reviewed that poem before I launched into it. When I was doing fair, of course, I'd have these things in fighting trim, because if you've ever learned something by heart, I've known some of these things for 50 and 60 years, in a that instead of a which, or a the that's omitted. So occasionally you have to go back and make sure that you haven't slipped in an error.
Did somebody say, you could print some of these books yourself?
Oh
Written
yeah,
down?
yeah. I'll tell you exactly what happened. Well, I've been writing poems for a long time, and preparing for publication is rather daunting. I took a course from an organization called Community Literature Initiative, and first, it's a 10-month course. First half is about poetic devices like anaphora, epistrophe, assonance, etc., that kind of thing. Then the second part of the course is focused on getting your book ready for publication. So you work with a cover designer, a layout designer, and a copy editor. And by the end of that, you have the appropriate digital files you need to send to a publisher. And at that point, I was ready to publish. And I would not have been able to do it without them providing those additional professional resources, because you need a copy editor, you need a layout designer. You can do without it, but you'll be sorry.
The
So,
way things are presented are very important, especially if you can't stand over everybody's shoulder while they're reading it and go, okay, that's really what that should be going right there. You need the professional support around you to make it look inviting for the reader.
well, the copy editor immediately gave me one piece of stunningly useful advice. And she said, remove the dates from your poems. Nobody needs to know when you wrote them.
Oh, really?
And she was absolutely right. I mean, I have it recorded in my archive, but for publication, nobody needs to know that this is written in 2020 or 2027. What difference does it make? Well, the dates were graphically also a distracting design element. So it made sense in every way, and it totally freed me design wise to look at the page in a different way.
Or you can even put them in a different order. I mean, if
Oh yeah, I did. Well, see, okay. Backstory is I during COVID year, I wrote a lot during COVID year, and for my own purposes, I made a book called The COVID Year, in which I presented the poems in chronological order. I never had it printed, but I did make a few copies, and it sucked because chronology is not narrative.
it might be
And
interesting to you, perhaps.
it was interesting to me, and I'm glad I did it. But as a something to publish for someone else, it was not useful, because first of all, it was unedited and it was distracting. But I had kind of married to the idea of chronology, and it took someone else seeing it, looking at it, and saying, you don't need that to make a significant edit. You can't see yourself. You're too close. My household, Richard and Jerry, make extremely detailed suggestions that I always listen to and almost always follow. Richard said, I object to this word, and he offered a different one. And I said, well, wow, that's much better. It's that specific. And Jerry said, hey, you cut a favorite line, put it back in. So, okay, it was better. So anyway, you can't see yourself. You can't be psychoanalyzed by your mom. It has to be a stranger.
And when you know the other person is coming from, say, and I'm going to use hippie talk here. When you hear them coming from a good place, you can recognize that. But when the goal is to make somebody's vision come out better, and everybody is sort of clued into that, this is sort of looping back to the Britain ensemble, because I do get the sense, is it James, that's the person who's in charge of it?
Yeah.
He does seem to want to make everybody sound good. With the Britain ensemble, what I've always liked is that it really did feel like an ensemble.
We were having a good time. I will tell you, we were having a good time. And I think it showed. And we also looked really beautiful because we all had our own costumes. You know, we weren't like costumed by central casting. So everybody's costume kind of reflected who they are.
Yes.
And so it looked like a bunch of individuals. We're a bunch of friends look about it as well as the sound.
It sounded entertaining. And you performed in that church in Altadena.
Yeah.
Which actually had really good acoustics. I mean,
it was beautiful. Oh, it had beautiful acoustics. We also performed in a place called the Folly Bowl in Altadena.
That was outdoors, right? That was
outdoors. That was our spring concert usually was there.
Right. But for quite a while, the Christmas concert in Altadena was part of our household.
Not just yours, but when that tradition went away, it was mourned widely.
And another thing, it had great parking.
Oh, it did. Yes. Absolutely great. A huge parking lot. A whole congregation could fit in it. It was great.
And they often did, I assume. Moving right along.
Moving along. This is fun.
What have you done outside of Faire as, say, an occupation, and has any Faire lessons dribbled on into that part of your life?
I was a businessman. I sold advertising media. Actually, I think the Faire had almost as little to do with that as possible. In fact, it was hard for me to even explain to people what I did for a living. And when I retired, I completely forgot how to do all of it. I sold advertising media, and really my business life and my professional creative life, my personal life were pretty far apart, frankly. Didn't intersect very much. I never met anybody at Faire who was a client or could have been a client.
So if I were to ask you now for 50 media inches on what I don't even know the terminology.
I sold advertising and sponsorship. I didn't write, I didn't create content, and I didn't make the ads.
So you just go from like the magazine to the...
I worked for the New Yorker, and then I worked for a gay men's magazine. And then I worked for 2 different online publications who concentrated on their topic. The content was about marketing. So our clientele was entities and individuals that wanted to reach marketers, because marketers spend more money than anyone else in a company. So we had a very lucrative audience segment and a very lucrative client segment, but I have no idea how I did it. So, and although I was the first salesperson at 2 different startups, and I launched both companies, and they were both successful. So I must have known how to do it for a little while.
Did you like being the king of the fools?
Yes and no. I could do it so much better now that I'm not it anymore. By the time you're done with it, after the first year, you know what to do, and you can't do it anymore. We put on some good parties. The job of being king, but okay, Jim and I came along as King of Fools after the guild had lost its guild house. The first Fools Guild party I went to was the very last one to be held at the house. So the guild struggled to find new venues to throw parties. And we threw our 3 parties at the first 2 parties were at the boys' camp in Griffith Park, which was a great venue because we could spend the night and had the kitchen in the morning. And then the last one was at the Hollywood Women's Club, which was also a pretty good party, pretty good place, but they closed it down early, so we couldn't really party until 2, alas. The most difficult aspect of being King of Fools now is finding a venue. Now, people in it are 50 and 60. I guess Bonnie's pretty young. She's king right now. But in many ways, what drew us together is no longer there. And in a few years, I don't know when or how long or for what reason, enough of us will have retired from living that will make the guild no longer a viable entity. But it's been fun 43 years, so that's a pretty good run.
Did you ever do anything at the Moose Lodge in Glendale?
Oh yeah, we did. The first party of the Moose Lodge was the King After Us. So I was there at many parties, and I was a moose for a while. First Moose Lodge party was Steve Marshall's Halloween, and he followed us. They covered all the walls with black plastic, painted flames coming up from the floor, had tree roots coming down through the ceiling, and there were tombstones on the ceiling. It was called Halloween in Hell. And the Moose Lodge had never seen decorations before. And they were absolutely blown away. We put on some gorgeous parties at that place. Paula's Under the Sea party was beautiful, and Heidi's Bollywood party was beautiful. And yeah, well, too bad. Oh well. Sic Transit Gloria Moose Lodge.
The Fool's parties always brought forth a great deal of creativity in the stage, creating atmosphere inducing elements.
It was totally fun. Before the movie Titanic came out, we had a Titanic party, and the iceberg came through the wall at midnight carrying the new year, and it happened to be Karen Sorno. The iceberg was built on a wheelchair ramp, and it came through a paper wall, and then we had painted little round portholes. And then after the iceberg came, we turned them all so that they were at a slant. It was a great party. And actually putting them on is the fun part. It's the thinking that really is fun. And people who just come to the parties don't really get as much out of it as people who put it together as well. And so I kind of miss the camaraderie that went with putting it together and taking it down, because it's
and the excitement of saying, okay, and then we can twist all the windows and lower
yeah.
the air
Actually,
conditioning.
nobody said it. It just somebody did it. It was just so I thought it would be funny, and it was.
And they had, like the fair, the people dressing in costume really did add to you see the pictures of the fair parties then. It's clear there is a theme, and it's clear that everybody is having a lot of fun, but put a lot of care and love into their costume. T-shirts and
No. Why
no.
bother? Don't come to this party in a t-shirt. We had a Bollywood party, and everyone at the party was in some form of exotic dress, except for a family of subcontinent Indian persons from India who are wearing Western style dress because that's what they actually wear. So,
Other than the Titanic, do you have a favorite Fool's
favorite
Guild?
party?
Yeah.
Oh, let me think. Yeah, sure. What was the best? Moulin Rouge was a pretty great party. Carnival in Venice. I can't say that they're all good, but there have been a lot of great parties. No, I don't. I can't really single one out.
What is
I'm
your
Richard.
favorite poem?
My favorite poem.
Well, you can't, in a sense, pick your
Okay, well,
favorite poem,
I do have
unless you
favorite poems.
can.
I think Ozymandias might be my favorite overall poem. It's a Shelley poem about the discoveries they were making in Egypt in the early 19th century. I believe Ozymandias was inspired by Abu Simbel, which are these great monolithic statues carved into a cliff that's since been flooded, but they were being discovered when Shelley was learning about it. This is Ozymandias. It's a sonnet, oddly enough, and it's all one sentence down to nothing beside remains. So you'll hear that. Okay, here it goes. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Ozymandias.
Very well done. You were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah. That's a good poem.
Well, that helps too, I suppose.
Well, that's why I'm a rhapsode, because a rhapsode, I can believe in the truth of Ozymandias, but I can't necessarily become Hamlet. I can say what Longfellow meant, but I'm not going to be Hannibal Lecter. I can't be someone else, but I can be me and believe in the mutual truth.
Is there something about it being a poem rather than a block of text that makes it easier?
Yeah, I like rhymes. I like Ozymandias rhymes. I didn't emphasize the rhyme, but there were rhymes in there. I like structure. In fact, as a poet, I'm not a free verse guy. I just, that's not me. I'm a structured, metric, rhythmic, rhyming poet. And I believe that poetry, you have to take care of every single word. You have to be more careful in poetry than you do in prose. There's less fat, at least in the way I think about it. And so it's a lot more focused. I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm done with that thought.
Well, no, when you're writing dialogue, you sort of have to write in the as and us and ums, because that's the way people talk. And you sort of need those as and us and yums to, as a listener, to kind of get in the flow. But with a poem, so often they are distilled, and they're
good word, distill. That's exactly what I meant.
And if you're performing a poem, you have to be clear in your mind what you're trying to get through. When you're doing a poem, I think it's more of sort of a one-shot thing. You're going for an emotion or a thought, or you're trying to create an image, and that's basically what you're doing. Maybe I'm making that all this.
No, I think you're right. I think the job of a rhapsode, of a poet, is not as complicated as the job of an actor. An actor, you have to convince the audience that you're this person and that you're saying and doing these things. I don't have to convince anybody that I'm a different person. I just have to convince them that my words ring true. It's a more distilled task than the actor.
But just as needed.
Just as just as well paid. Oh, no. Let me revise that. Fortunately, I don't need to make a living, because I've made a living and now I'm retired. So I can afford to give my work away or whatever I want to do with it.
Okay, I'm going to change things up a bit here. Who are you amused by whenever you read their stuff?
I think Jane Austen is remarkably funny. I find her books just laugh riots. The first line of Pride and Prejudice: it is a truth universally acknowledged that a young man of good fortune must be in want of a wife. Not really.
No, but
universally acknowledged. Well, Jane, well, maybe not. But it's a great opening set. It totally sets up the book. A truth universally acknowledged. That's the funny part of it.
And you know exactly where she's coming from.
Exactly, precisely.
Within like 5 words, you know what you're going to get
Yep.
for the next couple hundred pages or
Yep.
whatever it is.
And no Jane Austen, no Austen heroine ever gets kissed. That's not part of what's going on here.
You know exactly what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And she delivers it page after page after
Yeah.
page. And you're just, at least this is my reaction, you're just smiling all the way through it.
Smiling all the way through. Absolutely smiling. Anytime Mrs. Bennet talks, oh my God, would you please shut up?
You just want to slap her upside
You
the
just
head.
want to slap her, don't you?
And you know that that has been the reaction for like 250 years of people just going, God damn it, shut up. You
Uh-huh.
know,
And the interview with the Catherine de Bourgh at the end, and you're cheering for Lizzie, oh yes. It just
and Jane Austen wrote that. It's almost like a time capsule of a performance that you're going, I'm smiling. She was smiling.
yeah,
Hundreds of millions of people
hundreds
smiled.
of millions of people are smiling. There's a great quote about her. Apparently, she wrote her books while family life was going on around her. She sat at a desk in a busy room and just wrote.
Mhm.
And the quote is, "A great wit who says but little is much to be feared." Love Jane.
Well, I'm sort of running out of things to
I'm
say.
running. I've had a great time. This is totally fun. I really appreciate you including me in this process. And if you'd like me to say a poem for the end, I'll just say my own poem, and we
Yes,
can.
I have another blog actually called Authors Reads, and it's
Oh,
authors reading their original stuff.
oh,
And so I'll include this at the end of this one. If you could start it by saying once again, hi, I'm your name
right.
here. And then tell me sort of whatever you want people to know about this poem or a bit about why you wanted to bring this poem to whoever's listening attention.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
This Welcome to another episode of Authors Read, authors reading their own work. Today, my guest is Jim Kelly, reading his poem, Light Makes Right. I extracted this poem from a longer interview I had with him in November of 2022.
Hi there. I'm Jim Kelly. I have just recently published a book called "It Could Be Verse." And this poem appears on the back of the book because it is what I think of as my signature poem, articulating my poetic impetus. It goes like this. It's called Light Makes Right. And right is spelled Write. Light makes right. Alas, the world's a bitter place that's rife with myriad woes, and joyful life is hard to make and threshed within its throes. Many poets poetize to expiate their pain, but that's not why I versify. I write to entertain. For many, love is painful, all too often comes to grief. Ergo, I pray by poesy I might vouchsafe relief, and trust within my stanzas, hid within my merry rhymes, the sorrowing may solace find, inviting better times. For hope that springs eternal deep within a beating breast is strengthened and encouraged by the joy within a jest. Those that seek amusement here shall drink a decent draught. I cannot lift depression, but it lightens once you've laughed. Light makes right. Thank you.
Insert applause here.
So
Very
you can,
nice. Is that poem online someplace?
no, not really. It's on the back of the book. Oh, just on Facebook. It's on the It Could Be Verse page
Well,
somewhere.
let me find that and like that. And you do have a great voice, by the way.
Well, thank you.
It resonates well.
No,
It
thank
has a nice timbre to it. It really goes up and down without any breaks. You can tell that you've used it before and
Yeah.
that you're not afraid of a pause. It's not like,
I'm not afraid of a pause. That is a huge advantage in public speaking.
have you had any acting voice training? Or is it all?
I've taken some voice training from a singing teacher.
Mhm.
Every time I try to think of an actor, I get told pretty clearly that I'm not. I'm something else, but I'm not an actor.
Have you ever considered voice acting?
I have, but I haven't had enough interest to spend the amount of time it would take to get it done. There's a great word. I love words. There's a great word called velleity. Have you ever heard of a velleity?
I have not.
Okay, a velleity is an idle wish that does not rise to fulfillment. Like, oh, I wish I played the saxophone, or I wish they would shut up, or there's a lot of wishes that are totally idle, and those are velleities.
I wish I was in shape.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes. I wish I went to the gym more often. Well, yeah, that's a velleity. It's a wish that does not rise to fulfillment.
Is that from Latin?
It was in a poem in a poetry workshop that I went to. And to me, it was the central word of the poem. And the poetry teacher didn't know what it meant. And I thought, well, if you're going to teach this poem, you better know what that word means. So I made it my own. And oddly enough, when I was going through my mother's papers, she'd come across an interesting word and write down the word and its definition on a scrap of paper. And then just that was it. Writing it down was the act of what she was going to do with it. So she had written down velleity and had defined it on a piece of paper somewhere floating around the house. Maybe because I used it, but I don't know.
She was doing her homework to talk to her son.
Oh, yeah. My mom was 101 when she died, and she had all her brains and her everything to the very end. She was definitely together.
Well, she has a benign taste in interior design.
This
Why?
house,
Yes. Well, I haven't seen much of it through
all
this
you've seen
interview
is my bed.
and the wall behind it. I recognize it as it could have easily been any house in the San Fernando Valley from 1957 to 2017.
Well, it's they moved in here in Marin County in 1943, I think,
Hmm.
and my mother kept things. So all of my grammar school report cards and all of her grammar school report cards were still here.
What was her best subject?
Well, my mother grew up in rural southeastern Arizona, where my great grandfather had been justice of the peace of Tombstone Territory. And my mother grew up milking cows and walking to school and riding horses. And she left home when she was 16. She was clearly the brightest student in the county. Her scholarship applications are still there. And what the people said about her basically was, this is the smartest kid we know. You better give her the money. She
What
needs
a
it.
great legacy.
Years later, we went back and I met one of her high school classmates. And his name was Jim Burnett. He was a writer as well. And we had lunch with him in Bisbee. And he said, Francis, this is your son. You got married. Who? I don't know. I don't know how anybody had the courage to marry you. All of the boys in Cochise County were afraid of you. You were smarter than us, stronger than us, could ride horses better. You were the better student. We were terrified of you. She said she had no idea. Not terrified, but like, no, who could date her? She can already
Yeah,
shoot
out
that
of
line
our
down.
league, I think the
Yeah,
expression
exactly.
is.
Yeah, she's out of our league, exactly. But she didn't know it.
Well, anyway, is there anything else you would like to leave us with, or shall I push the end button?
I think I've really had a great time talking to you. It's been totally fun. These are questions I had not considered or looked at them in that way, and it's you really don't know what you think until an interlocutor elicits it. So thank you for being so good at it, and I enjoyed myself. Okay.
And now I push another button. I think. Oh, the one that says recording. We'll
Yeah,
hit the
I'm
one there.
looking at that, still blinking.
That was my November 2022 interview with James Kelly. If you'd like to contact Jim, You can email him and request his book at the same time at jimxxjim@mac.com. You can contact me with any questions or comments about the podcast itself at djng@earthlink.net. And if you have something you'd like to say, please feel free to contact me at djng@earthlink.net, and we can see about getting you on this thing. That's it for now. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.